William Wolfskill came to California he arrived here in 1831. He first left from Franklin, Missouri in 1822 on William Becknell's second expedition. So he was basically a trailblazer over the Santa Fe Trail. And then he was a trapper in New Mexico for a number of years. He was a mountain man, and he was partners with another famous mountain man named Ewan Young, and they led trapping expeditions out of Santa Fe and Taos, New Mexico. And William became a Mexican citizen in Taos, New Mexico. He converted to Catholicism and became a Mexican citizen. Guillermo Guisquil, he was called, because Wolfskil's a little hard to say, he was known as Guillermo Guisquil. So he became a Mexican citizen just before he left for California. And when he came here, he came over the Old Spanish Trail and was one of the early trailblazers of the Old Spanish Trail. He traveled on the route that later became the main trail of the Old Spanish Trail. And he got here in February of 1831, and penniless, didn't have a dime. It was a very tough journey. But he decided to stay in California. He became good friends with the local priest over at the San Gabriel Mission. He later started growing vineyards and had orchards. And then his brother, John Reed Wolfskill. Now, John Reed was born also in Kentucky. I should say that William was born in Kentucky and then went to Missouri and then finally came to California. Well, John Reed Wolfskill was also born in Kentucky. And William and John Reed were very close. John Reed came over the Old Spanish Trail as well, and he arrived in California in 1838, and he lived with William Wolfskill on his ranch, or not his ranch, but on his farm in downtown Los Angeles, where William grew orange trees. He had beautiful orchards. He was very famous for his orchards and vineyards. And William was also very famous for his brandy, what he called aguardiente, which is brandy in Spanish, and he was famous for that. Well, John Reed stayed with William for a number of years, helping him plant these orchards and vineyards, and then he got restless. He wanted his own legacy. John Reed wanted his own place. So he heard from one of William's friends, Jonathan Trumbull Warner, also known as Juan Jose Warner. He was also an American who became a Mexican citizen, that there was some great land to be had up in Northern California. So John Reed came up here, and he was hoping for a land grant in Northern California, and he went to see Comandante Mariano Vallejo, who was the commander in this area, and he tried to get a land grant, and Vallejo said, "Nope, you're not a Mexican citizen. I only can give land grants to Mexican citizens." So John Reed came back, and he was very discouraged, and then he went back up again, and again Vallejo turned him down, and John Reed was just about to quit. He thought, it's useless, I'm never going to get a land grant here. And he ran into Jacob Leese, who was Mariano Vallejo's brother-in-law. He was married to Vallejo's sister Rosalia. So Jacob Leese interceded on behalf of John Reed, and John Reed came back, and he was very excited, and he said to his brother, very excited, Vallejo is going to give us a land grant, but only with one condition. You have to apply for it because you are the Mexican citizen. He will not give it to me. And William was very sad. He didn't want to see his brother go up north. He loved having his brother there, and he was very close to John Reed. But John Reed said, "No, I really want to go back, and he's going to give you some land on Puda Creek, and so on this river." On this creek, Puda Creek, and so William made application for it and was granted the land grant, Rancho Rio de los Putos. And the two brothers came up here. William still lived in Southern California, but William came and helped his brother and sent him all kinds of things. It was John Reed who arrived on the land grant and he built a little hut, and he started growing vegetables and fruit, and it was very lonely. They said that sometimes he didn't see another human being for 5 weeks. It was so, the land was so not occupied. There were no settlers up there. There were the Patwin Native Americans. The Patwin tribe was in the area, and John Reed did see some of the Patwin Indians, but he was up there by himself, establishing the land grant, and he was also there with a lot of grizzly bears. They said the first night he arrived in the area that he had to sleep up in a tree because there were so many wild animals that were prowling around that night. So anyway, slowly John Reed was able to establish Rancho Rio de los Putos, and he and William had the ranch, and finally John Reed asked William, he said, "I'd really like to have half of this Rancho de los Putos," and so William sold it to him for $5,000, and later, even several years later, William finally decided that he no longer was going to stay as part of the Rancho Rio de los Putos, and he sold it to other folks.